Now it's time for the church window. So what I want is a frame whose inside matches the curve of the window, and on the outside it's going to be rectangular on the bottom and have an angle that matches the gable on the top. So let me explain this with a drawing. Here's the gable here, and it's 45 degrees, which means this is 90. And so if this is the church window, let me try and draw it sort of, not to scale, of course. What I want is a frame that fits right up in there and then comes down like that. So this is a frame made of my normal 2x4 material, at least the outside of the frame. So there's that. And then the inside of the frame, and I'll hatch that here, is going to be plywood, but the inner part has to be cut to exactly match the profile of the church window, and the outside matches the profile of the gable. So it's this piece of plywood that I need to work on, and this will involve some very fancy shop work that I'm happy to show you on the video as I go. And like so many things here, well, I've never done this before, but should work. So what I want to do is take this material here. This was cut off from another project, and I'm going to bend this around the church window carefully so it doesn't break. And as I go, I'm going to hold it in with these blocks that I just cut on the drill press. So there'll be like one here, and one here, one here, one here. Maybe 4 blocks on the curved section, and maybe just a couple on the straight section. The blocks will be screwed to this plywood. This is not the plywood that'll be used in the greenhouse. This plywood is just going to be the template. And there'll also be some glue gluing this curved piece to the blocks, so that when I take away the church window, this should exactly match the profile of the church window. And then I can cut this plywood first, and then later another piece of plywood with a router bit that has a bearing on it. I'll show you that, and get the exact profile that I need. So it's a lot of steps, but in the end, this should be a lot better than the quick way, which is to trace the outline with a pencil and then take a saber saw and cut it. Now, I could maybe get that to come out okay, especially as I'm going to have to caulk the seam between the plywood and the window here. But this will be better, and maybe nobody will notice except me and everybody who watches this video. Now, a couple hours have elapsed. That's enough for the glue to set. You know, the church window is not glued. It's just sitting there. And so I'm going to push it, you see, and this thin piece of wood here that I flexed is now in the same shape as the church window. So the church window is going to go away, and I'm going to turn this into a router guide. And what I want to do is put these pieces in here to provide a platform for the router. All right, now we're ready to route. I suppose it's obvious, but my template for the church window is not a template for the church window. It's a template for half of the church window. And I've got it now centered on the final plywood that's going to make the frame for the window. And it's all clamped down. I don't think you could see all the clamps. And now all I need to do is keep that router bearing up against the curved template, and it should cut. So let's see what happens. Okay, moment of truth. So my shape is half cut because my template's only half of the window. I then flip the plywood upside down, and that raises the edge just enough so that I can butt the church window up against the edge, and the fit is pretty good. Let me turn this way. You can see here it's like pretty good. It's not perfect, but there's going to be some caulking in there. And so all I have to do now is keep the church window where it is and butt the template up against the other side of the church window until it's tight. Lock that template down, move the church window out of the way, and make the second cut, and then I should have it. So with the church window butted up against the actual cut that I just made, I now have the template butted up against this side of the church window. There we go, just got our focus, and it's all clamped down. So I'm now going to take the church window away, and all I have to do is run the router, and we should have our complete shape. So it almost fits. The bottom straight side is in, the straight sides are in, and just here at the top of the window, it doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to mark this with a pencil that I just sharpened. Just mark that there. And I will cut this a little bit with a saber saw, and then we will try. And here it is finished. So I had to do some sanding for the tight spots, and after that, though, the board slides in, and it does conform to the shape. Not perfectly, but, well, maybe the church window is not perfect either. But definitely exactly what we need. Now, I may trim the outside parts of the plywood in order to size it a little bit better for the gable. It's going to go into a frame, though, and that frame is what gets attached to the framing of the gable. the window will be attached to the plywood very carefully with blocks that'll be on the other side, not the side you see now. The window will be painted and the plywood will be finished naturally, most likely. Okay, just as the plywood surround frames the church window, so do we need a frame for the plywood. That frame is what's going to be attached to the actual framing of the greenhouse. So this dimension here, 146, all these numbers are centimeters, is the amount of vertical space available in the gable. And ideally, the outer frame here is going to fill the gable from top to bottom, although I've allowed about, I don't know, a few centimeters extra because things usually don't turn out quite right, and I can always cut a piece of wood to fill the gap there. The actual location of the plywood in here, I'm going to save for later. After the frame is completely finished, then I'll cut the plywood. It's only 10 centimeters. The frame is just 10 centimeters from the church window on the sides, but there's probably more space top and bottom. So there are 5 pieces to be milled here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These inner dimensions, 73 centimeters here, 89 here, are precise. There's a 45-degree angle to match the angle of the gable. These two angles turn out to be 67.5 because the total angle here is 135. Now these outer dimensions, they're estimates. I'm not going to use those for cutting, and the reason is that a 2x4 when it comes is 3.81 centimeters, but as you're about to see, I need to put this wood through the jointer and the planer, and when I do that, it's going to lose wood. It won't be 3.81. I don't know what it'll be, but it doesn't matter. You know, anything over 3 centimeters is fine for something like this. The only thing I want to add here is I was happy to use trigonometry. See here, I'm taking the tangent of 67.5 and so on, and checking my work by taking the sine and cosine and so on and so forth. Okay, we're starting with 2x4s, and they're fine the way they are for framing, but they're not nearly straight enough for what we're going to do here. So first thing I need to do is just cut them roughly the length, because when I put them through the jointer, we don't want them to be any longer than necessary. You can do this a lot of ways, but it's really convenient to do it on a miter saw, especially if you have the miter saw positioned the way I do. You can't see it, but there's an open door to my right, and so I could actually handle pieces of almost any length at all. Okay, let me explain how a jointer works. There are 2 tables, the outfeed table and the infeed table, and a rotating set of blades, which are exactly aligned with the outfeed table. So you run the wood through and it hits the cutter. When it comes to the other side of the cutter, it's not only the same height as the outfeed table, which is maybe a 32nd higher than the infeed, not much, and it's as flat as the cutter can make it. Cutter maybe can't make it completely flat because maybe it's out of flat by more than a 32nd, and it's necessary to put pressure on the outfeed table to keep it flat. And so when you pass through, the cutter will have done some work, maybe all the work, whatever the cutter cut is flat, but may not be enough. So you have to do it again. And you do it until you have a flat surface. So I'm going to unplug the microphone, and you can watch me pass one of these very, very rough 2x4s through the jointer, and then when I get it through, I'll turn it over so you can see what the cutter did. So the first couple passes you heard the cutting, and then there was a period, especially the first pass, where the cutter wasn't cutting anything. That's because there was a dip in the wood and the cutter couldn't get there. And then when I turned the wood over, you saw that there were some smooth spots and some very rough spots. So I made another pass and it almost cut continuously. And the third pass, you heard it cutting the entire way, and now I have a flat surface. So I have one good surface on one 2x4. I'm now going to turn it on edge. I'm going to have this good surface against this fence here, and I'm going to get myself another flat surface that will be at 90 degrees to this one. So you heard that cut continuously. That meant that this edge was pretty flat to begin with. No need for any more passes. The cutter was constantly engaged in the wood. So I have two surfaces on this one. Okay, with two sides flat and 90 degrees to each other on all 5 boards, we have a choice of how to deal with the other 2 sides. One is the table saw, and the other is the planer. I'm going to use the planer. And in addition to making the opposite sides flat, the planer is going to make all 5 boards the same dimension, very precisely, and that's going to make the milling that I do, especially these angles like 67.5 degrees, 45 degrees, and so on, much more straightforward. It's really, really difficult to deal with crooked wood. The way the planer works is really pretty simple. There's a flat bed and there's a cutter, and the good side is against the flat bed and the cutter cuts the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the non-true flat face on all 5 boards, and I'm going to keep doing that until I get a clean pass on all 5, and that will make all 5 the same size. Now for this application, which is this frame, I don't really care what the size of the boards is, I just want them to be the same. Now all 5 pieces have 4 edges that are straight. They're 90 degrees to one another, and working with wood like this is really a pleasure. Everything works better. Dimensioning, cutting, gluing, screwing, joining, everything works better with straight wood. That's what we have. I will not do this for the framing of the greenhouse. Framers don't do things like this. But this is more like a picture frame for our church window rather than construction framing, which is what most of the rest of the greenhouse is. Now this frame that I construct is not going to fit perfectly into the opening in the gable, but, well, none of the other windows are going to fit perfectly into the opening either. There'll be a lot of shimming and whatnot that takes place, and we'll get to that much later in the project. Okay, just so you can see where we're headed in case you got lost there, I've laid out my 5 boards over the plywood, and this is roughly where they go. Now, they're not the right length, and none of the angles are cut, so nothing fits. The good news is that they're all too long. If they were not long enough, I couldn't really fix that. And so now I need to cut them to length, and I need to get the angles right. So that's the next job. I'm going to start making the precision cuts with the 67.5 degree cuts. So I have my miter saw tilted over. It has a click stop at 22.5. I don't know if you can quite read that. Oh, that made it worse. Well, that's the way it works out. I mean, the 22.5 is measured from 90, so 90 minus 22.5 is 67.5. And then on the wood, I like to just make a pencil line, not to guide the saw, but just in the general, generally where the cut is, because when you're cutting miters, it's really easy to put the wood in upside down or wrong way or something, and then you cut a perfect miter, but it's not the miter that you want. It's the opposite of what you want or something like that. So here are the 2 pieces I just cut, butted up against each other on top of the table saw, and you could see that together it looks like 135 degrees, which it better be, because that's twice 67.5. Now I don't have any more 67.5 degree cuts, but I have 2 more cuts at 45 degrees. That's going to be the apex of this frame, and that should snuggle right up against the top of the greenhouse rafters, which are going to be at 45 degrees themselves. So here we are, all laid out on the driveway. That's the 67.5 degree cut. There's the 45 degree cut, another 67.5. And I measured the distance from there to there, and it's 103.2. And I measured the distance from there to there. It's also 103.2. So this should assemble okay. The remaining cuts I need at the bottom, but those are good old 90 degree cuts, and I should be able to get those right. So once I make those cuts, the frame is then cut, and we go on to the next step. All right, here I am ready to make the groove. I've got the right dado blades in there to measure about 1/2 inch. And I have this stock guide attached to my fence that has some rubber wheels that pushes the stock against the fence and also down. For me, the secret to table saw safety, not losing any fingers, is to keep your fingers nowhere near the blade. That's number one. Number two, preventing kickback. The guide is going to prevent kickback, so I'm not worried about that. And you're going to see when I make the cut that my fingers hardly even get anywhere near the surface of the table saw. So with the grooves cut now, it's time to join the pieces of wood. In carpentry construction, you use nails mostly. I'm going to use screws. In fine woodworking, you never use nails, rarely screws. You use different kinds of joints. This is in between. The appearance will be that of framing, but the joints have to be made pretty precisely so that it'll look good, the plywood will fit, and everything will be the way it was supposed to be. Besides, I put a lot of care into these angles and getting the lengths right. So what you see now is a corner clamp that I use quite a bit, and it's excellent, and it's going to give me an exact 90-degree joint here for the 45-degree cuts at the peak, but the 67.5-degree cuts are a different story. I think I'm going to use my domino, not because I need the domino, screws and glue would be fine, but because it gives me the ability to set the positioning and makes it a lot easier to get the right joint. So I'll illustrate the domino once I get it all set up, and we're going to make the joints that way. Okay, I'm going to use the domino now on a piece of scrap cut to 45 degrees. Again, this is a case of the 45 degrees being relatively easy because the domino can set itself to 45 degrees. And rather than explain what the domino is, let me just show you using the domino, and let me show you the result. I was very easily able to get these domino slots into position, so now I have no trouble holding the position of the 67.5-degree angles. These dominoes will just slide together here like that. There you go, and the domino will hold the position. So I've reduced the problem to a clamping problem, and I just need to figure out how to clamp this, since this is framing and the inside of the gable is supposed to be just functional, not necessarily attractive, I may clamp this just by screwing a board onto the non-groove side. You know, the groove side is out on the outside where everyone can see it, but this side isn't. I think I might just do it that way with the domino now holding the position. That should work okay. We'll see. So I realized that it wasn't really necessary to worry about clamping the joints because I have the plywood, which is a pretty snug fit in the groove, to hold everything together. And with that, I decided to do a dry fit. And there's no glue or screws or anything. This is just a dry fit. But the dry fit works extremely well. And it is now finished. There's a little work to erase pencil marks and maybe do just a little bit of a sanding. Actually, the thing about the jointer and the planer is that they leave very sharp edges, and those will have to be knocked back. So it is finished. I'll zoom in here just so you can see some of the detail here. Let me free up the camera. And you could see it is a very tight fit. And so what I'll do is I will kind of set up a big table in the garage by putting some panels on sawhorses. I'll use that for the glue up because I need something pretty flat. And I will just go at it side by side, gluing everything together, and I won't need much clamping, and I may put some screws in just to tie things together while the glue dries, but that's all easy stuff. And this chapter, I think this is a very long chapter 6, is now concluded. This is by far the most complicated part of the entire greenhouse because the church window is curved, and I think, as I may have mentioned, shops aren't set up for curved stuff. Also, we can't just pound this thing into the framing. We have to treat it very gently, like some sort of holy relic that, for all I know, it might be, and build a frame. So I've already established that the window fits snugly into the plywood, and the plywood is framed, and that framing, for example, the framing right there, will go right up into the rafters. Very tight fit. It's 45 degrees, and so will the rafters be 45 degrees.